Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, here to review 7 days of action at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the build-up to the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500 and what has been a frankly crazy week at Indianapolis. We have so many talking points to discuss. If you're new to the podcast, it's a great time to start following along with the Indianapolis 500 around the corner, and we are here with weekly episodes every week for the last 2 years. We still haven't missed one, and we'll carry on marching. If you don't know me, I'm Dan Jones, accredited IndyCar journalist for DIVEBOMB Motorsport magazine, joined by my partner in crime, Archie O'Reilly. Archie, welcome back, as you have been for the last 2 years. Crazy times this week, and very much looking forward to the great spectacle and racing 6 days from recording.
I mean, this has been a few of the most manic days I think I've ever kind of seen or been a part of. I especially since we've started covering IndyCar, I don't really think I recall anything quite like it. It's been just kind of constant drama. I mean, qualifying Sunday was kind of the crescendo, wasn't it? I mean, it was what I would describe as joyous overstimulation. I mean, by the time I'd actually fallen asleep, given we're over here in the UK, it was light. That kind of set it up. But no, I would not have it any other way. I wish these 2 weeks could last forever. We're recording after Monday practice, and knowing that we've only got one practice session and the race left, kind of sad. I just love these 2 weeks so much, and Indy just seems to deliver year on year.
So if you don't know how this podcast works, we're going to go over the key talking points of the week, and then we'll run over the qualifying order. Obviously, we don't usually do this, but qualifying usually doesn't take place a week before the race. I don't think it does anywhere else in the world apart from Indianapolis. And at the end, we always just have a bit of banter, a bit of fun to round off the episode. We won't do much previewing on this episode, just because we want to say that for another episode. So that will likely come out Thursday or Friday this week. We don't know exactly when. It depends on a couple of things. But later this week, we will have a bonus episode to preview the Indianapolis 500 in full. But we sort of want to review the last week or so, because there's been a lot more talking points than I think we expected a week ago. There's a lot to talk about. But I think the best place to start off is Robert Shwartzman and a truly, truly incredible pole run. I think there's a lot of special moments in Indianapolis. I mean, this has been going we've had 108 times of doing this before, and there are so many magical stories. But I think Robert Shwartzman is right up there at the very best of those magical stories. After taking pole position for the Indianapolis 500 in his first ever oval race as an IndyCar rookie, Prema's first Indianapolis 500, their first oval race in the sport. It's the true underdog story that it sounds bad to say, but after 4 or 5 races of Alex Palou domination, to have somebody like Robert Shwartzman line up on the pole for the Indianapolis 500 is the most heartwarming, most fantastic story there is out there. And as I said, a true underdog tale, which will be passed down for generations to come, because I still don't think I've quite comprehended what has quite happened. I think I saw there were odds, I think, pre-qualifying at the start of the week. Robert Shwartzman was something like 5,000 to 1 to take Indianapolis 500 pole, and here he is leading the field to green next Sunday. I mean, I really don't have the words to quite summarise this, because I think of all the stuff we've covered in this podcast, this might be the most remarkable thing I think we've ever had to speak about. My colleague here picked Robert Shwartzman to be bumped this time last week, which one is hilariously funny, and we'll go down to end of year moments just because of how bad that prediction is. But two, probably also speaks about what was expected out of Prema, and therefore how remarkable this truly is.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably tell by this, but I'm kind of just speechless still. It took quite a long time for me to put it into writing last night. Part of the reason why I was up until it was light, but it's just, yeah, I don't really have the words for how impressive it was. Like, and Shwartzman himself said this, it's not even really the sort of thing that he would let himself dream about, because he thought it was just kind of stupid to dream about. It obviously takes so much to master Indy, and we've seen the likes of Will Power, the greatest ever qualifier, has never been on pole for the Indy 500. You look at what happened with Carlin, who were in a very similar boat to Prema in 2019. They had a couple of drivers bumped from the race. I am a bit red-faced by my prediction that he would get bumped, but at the same time, that at the time was not unpopular. It's not something that by any means defied logic. And I think fuel was only added to that fire when on Tuesday, Prema essentially missed the entirety of practice because they weren't ready. They had 22 laps between Eilert and Shwartzman. Shwartzman had 6 of them. But I think while a lot of people at the time, and understandably so, kind of lamented that, saw them as they've come in underprepared, maybe actually retrospectively it was them showing respect for actually the perfection that it takes, or as close as you can get to perfection at Indy. Because Schwartzman's credited the patience, the low risk, high reward approach that Prema have had all week. And I mean, let's not beat around the bush as well. They've been really shrewd with the recruitments. They've got some very high quality personnel on board. Ryan Briscoe as an advisor is, by all accounts from Schwartzman, been a massive influence for him. But no, I think if you just kind of look at their week, it was a slow start, obviously missing the majority of Tuesday. They were quite low down on the speed charts. I think a lot of that was because other drivers and teams were searching for toes. They were doing qualifying practice, obviously paid off in the end. But then last Friday, there was a bit of a statement. He was up, I think, in the top 15 in practice, and then delivers one qualifying run on Saturday that gets him in the field. He's in the 2:33s, and I think everyone's a bit mind blown. This is a team that hadn't made the Fast 12 at all in their first 5 races. They've been kind of plagued by a bit of a litany of issues, and Schwartzman's been quite frustrated. I think, he's quite a bubbly character, but it felt like he was losing his patience a little bit. But one of my favorite things about this was he came into the press conference after Saturday making the Fast 12 and said, this was quite a legendary moment. What's more than legendary? Because whatever happened on Sunday was just insanity. I mean, he's the real deal. It's 43 years since we've seen a rookie driver on pole, 42 years since a rookie team on pole. And Prema and Schwartzman have done it as a rookie team combination. And not only is this their first Indy 500, this is their first oval race on a 2.5 mile unforgiving super speedway. It's a story for the ages, inexplicable, pretty unprecedented, and no doubt historic.
Yes, when he ran on Saturday, I was like, okay, well, he's 4th in the draw, so, you can put that a bit down to conditions, and went quicker the next day. What I've been joking to people is Michael Cannon, who was obviously an Indy 500 at Primo and left the team basically before he'd even started, and must have left his notebook in the factory and somebody started copying off it or something along those lines. It was so unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, Schwartzman's a really great guy. He's always very funny. I don't think he quite comprehended what happened. And yeah, it's just big name after big name fell to Prema of all people. So I also joke, like, how embarrassing must this be for the rest of the field that these newcomers turn up, new driver, new team, and beat them all comfortably. It's like a Brawn GP story. That's the comparison I've seen a few times, and you can't really put it into words because it's not something that we've ever seen in our lifetimes. Anything like this, especially at Indy, where the last couple of poles you'd say have been quite predictable. He was going to end up on the pole. This was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, last 3 years, McLaughlin, Palou, Dixon. Was it Dixon again before that as well?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
These are major names, but I love how much he was just kind of riding the wave. Like he wasn't afraid to say, "I was really, really nervous." He was like, "I've never been nervous in a qualifying session before," but he was saying he'd gone up to Ryan Briscoe before qualifying. He was like, "I'm nervous. Like, is this normal?" He's like, "Of course it's normal." Like, Scott McLaughlin was one of the most vocal about how he absolutely hates qualifying because it's just so high pressure, so nerve-wracking.
Kyle Larson, of all people, hates qualifying.
Yeah, and Kyle Larson is like the most unflappable human being, even more unflappable than Alex Palou. He kind of just rides every wave that comes his way. But no, Schwartzman, I mean, he's just loved it all. I just love how much he seems to be enjoying it and embracing it, and he felt it seemed like he was really feeling every little bit of qualifying, which I just loved. He was feeling every emotion, and yeah, again, that just eruption with the whole Prema team in pit lane. I mean, even the likes of Will Power were down there kind of congratulating and kind of maybe semi-joining in the celebrations. So it's just an amazing, amazing tale. But even Schwartzman himself knows that next week is going to be incredibly tricky. It would be hard enough if his first oval race was at Gateway, for instance, let alone it being at Indy. It's going to be a baptism of fire, but I mean, don't write them off. We've learned that, but it's going to be hard.
And this is why I'm a Homestead Miami advocate on this podcast. Bring it back after St. Petersburg. Let's have an oval race before the 500. It's still a crime. We don't have Texas on the calendar anymore. Fuming. Absolutely fuming. Anyway, I think that's it with Robert Shwartzman, because I could go on for him about hours, because this is such a cool story, and there's not many cooler people I would have wanted to see on the pole than Robert Shwartzman. So what might be an interesting stat is how many more listens this song has got on Spotify in the last 24 hours.
I've probably accounted for quite a lot of them, to be fair. As soon as that was over, I just had it on repeat, and it's only like a 2-minute song.
Yeah, I wonder how many people had heard of Robert Shwartzman at Indianapolis, because especially at Indianapolis, there's a lot of sort of casual local fans who turn up for the 500 and that's it. So I wonder how well known Robert Shwartzman was prior.
He got a really cool ovation.
Oh,
he got
did,
a really
yeah.
cool ovation. I think everyone was really buying into the underdog story because, I mean, who doesn't love an underdog story, right?
Yeah, I think that might have been the ultimate underdog. I mean, it was for you. Quite embarrassing.
For sure. And friend of the podcast, James Scott, I'm pretty sure made that same prediction.
Okay.
I will throw him under the bus.
Well, put it this way. I didn't, so I'm very glad about my prediction from last week. I mean, I think I put him 33rd in fairness, but hey, I didn't say he'd get bumped. I said he'd make the field. So I can leave my head held high. Oh, yeah, but saying he's bumped and he qualifies in pole is really embarrassing. Like, saying he's 33rd is embarrassing, but that's really embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, but I think it makes it all the better as a story.
It does, but it's also going to be like I think our blooper of the year in that end of the year awards.
But it is genuinely emblematic of the story, the kind of scale of the underdog story, because he was the easy pick for pretty much everyone. I think, like
apart from me.
No, not everyone, but for a lot of people, Prema were the easy pick. They were.
It was quite strange because Ilott wasn't really quick. He was better than we thought, but he wasn't really quick.
But I also think if Shwartzman and Ilott both qualified where Ilott was, you'd be looking at that and thinking, bloody hell, good job, Prema. That's a resounding success. Just to get them in the field and not have to be kind of.
Yeah, I mean, Ilott's going to line up 21st, which is
pretty good going.
Quite decent, yeah. It's better than I thought. But yeah, it was just weird. Shwartzman has so much more pace in him. But maybe Honda gave him Chevrolet. Maybe Chevrolet gave him a rocket ship engine. I don't know. We'll have to find out. I mean, we'll get onto rocket ship engines a bit later, I think. So it's a bit of an internal joke, to be honest, but we'll bring up the rocket ship engines later. Right, there's a massive elephant in my room, so we better talk about it. Which is
there's one in mine as well.
No, is there? Fine. Which is Team Penske and. Well, another cheating scandal is probably the easiest way for me to put it. Second time in the year, we are talking about quite a dramatic and controversial Team Penske incident. So obviously, first of all, McLaughlin he was looking very good for pole. Very good. He was my pick for pole, both pre and post. Fast Friday, that's so I'm just trying to get the words out there. He was my pick for pole, and he was running well all week and had a monster accident on Sunday morning. Obviously, a lot of drivers don't run in that practice because of that exact reason, where if you crash, you're a bit screwed.
I mean, we'll come on to the crashes a bit as well later, but I think there's two things to consider here. The car's on a real knife edge with the hybrid, more so than there's been in recent years, but also the conditions were changing really dramatically. I think partially because the cars are on such a knife edge, that was having more of an impact. But at the same time, you were going into these morning practice sessions essentially not knowing the conditions, and weren't necessarily adapting enough, because we saw Marcus Armstrong do the same thing on Saturday morning in practice. So yeah, just wanted to chime in with that. Yeah,
it was a huge accident. I mean, a wheel came off, which IndyCar will need to investigate, because that's something they quite publicly said that shouldn't happen anymore. But huge crash in turn 2. Thankfully, McLaughlin was okay and got out the car with his own steam. But it was a really frightening accident, and it was a bit of a shock because McLaughlin was looking really good. We haven't seen too many McLaughlin incidents at the 500 in recent years.
I mean, he'd put down a lap in the mid 2:33s, I think, as well. Like, he'd put down a proper serious, a bit of a heater of a lap.
Yeah, and then provisionally he would line up 12th because everybody else would run in fast 12, and therefore he wouldn't get his run in, so he would line up 12th. And then it turned out he'd line up 10th because both Will Power and Joseph Newgarden were pulled out of the line for qualifying. We thought, okay, this is weird. What's happened here? Turns out they failed technical inspection, which isn't too uncommon. I mean, Connor Daly failed technical inspection the day before. Helio Castroneves didn't. They said they did in the broadcast, but turned out he didn't. But failing technical inspection isn't hugely unusual. And then we find out that they're taken back to their garages and not allowed to run. And then comes out the story that they've been putting a filler to basically seal the gap between two attenuators at the back of the car, which basically streamlines the car and reduces drag, so therefore would make it incrementally quicker. I mean, the part itself is absolutely tiny, but obviously here at Indy, you're going for the smallest of margins, and anything can make the difference. So pulled out a line, which is quite controversial. And it was rumours Chip Ganassi had seen this on pit road and had raised it to IndyCar. IndyCar themselves say they saw something on the 12 car which they were unsure about, but let Power go to pit road anyway. And then they saw the same thing on the 2 of Joseph Newgarden, at which point they realised, okay, this is illegal, and advised Power that he could run but would fail post-run inspection due to this filler basically put between the attenuator. So that was shocking in itself, that Team Penske had failed tech inspection for another quote-unquote cheating allegation. And then it's got even wilder today with the Joseph Newgarden's winning car from last year sitting in the IMS museum. And there's been a lot of people in and around that car who have noticed that attenuator is filled up, which means his car that won the Indianapolis 500 last year was quite possibly an illegal car. So it's a story that's going to go on throughout the week, and we'll probably have to come back to on Thursday once we have more updates. But it's a really shocking turn of events, which I feel a bit of a shame for Robert Shwartzman, actually, because it's sort of taken over the magic of his pole run. But for the second time in just over 12 months, we got a serious allegation of Team Penske and breaking the rule book.
I had stuff to do today, and best believe none of that stuff got done because, I mean, this emerged, I think, about 4 o'clock UK time. We had a press conference with Doug Bowles about 15 minutes later, and then for the subsequent few hours, I was writing a quite extensive piece that is probably worth you reading if you have kind of questions on it's on the DIVEBOMB site, and there's only so much we can answer here, but that goes into depth and kind of covers a lot of what Doug Bowles, IndyCar and IMS president, had to say. He was the one at the forefront of the decision making in terms of penalties, but yeah, just to kind of dive into it, it's a mess, and it is, as you say, a shame that it's overshadowing one of the great on-track stories. Story kind of seemed to start when you saw them chiseling away at the rear wing on Power's car with a blowtorch and some other tools, and having passed through tech, you're immediately like, you can't make any big changes in pit lane. So that was a bit odd, and then obviously, yeah, it transpired that they'd put this filler on the attenuator, which, by the way, is a safety device. So not only is it kind of giving them a performative advantage, they are meddling with something that is designed for safety that should absolutely not be meddled with. It was a bit strange that the 2 and the 12 car were both out on pit lane with this news, with an illegal part having been found. Still kind of unsure why they were both out there, because Power was passed through with some kind of doubt, and then Newgarden, it was found on his car, and then a call had to be made from the crew chief on the 2 to the crew chief on the 12, and basically to alert them to pull Power aside. And
what is really strange is McLaughlin's crash car, they have supposedly not seen it on his car, which I think is really weird, because I think you'd either have 1 or you'd have 3. And that we got no reason to doubt IndyCar, but at least in my mind, I find it a bit confusing. Okay, why hasn't McLaughlin got this part on his car? And there's been images of his pole car last year quite possibly having that filler in. So, yeah, I mean, McLaughlin keeps his, he was set to start 12th. He now starts 10th because both Newgarden and Power have been basically relegated to the back. So they're going to start 32nd and 33rd. So I thought that was also a bit of a weird one, how McLaughlin didn't have this part, but the other 2 did.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Cindric as well, when he was interviewed on Fox, like during the qualifying broadcast, he didn't seem to know, well, he was at least saying he didn't know. It was again one of those weird cases of like different stories being told by different parties, both kind of within the team and IndyCar and the team having kind of a different story. And I don't feel like Penske have helped themselves too much in this situation. I mean, they haven't really commented anything other than saying that they accept the penalties today. Yeah, it looked like it was going to be a row 4 lockout, but then kind of behind the scenes, IndyCar were basically overnight establishing the facts, because Doug Bowles had initially said that, well, essentially the rules suggest that they could only go to the rear of the session that they were competed in and failed tech for. But then obviously it came to Monday and we got this big announcement that they were being sent to the rear of the field. But Bowles had said to a small group of media who were at the track that basically the plan was to impose some penalties after the event. But then he came out today, and as we record on Monday, and said that basically the gravity of the situation and the event and the need for integrity for what is the biggest race on earth means that, especially with it being a 2-weekend thing, they're not necessarily going to treat it like a usual race weekend, which is one weekend. You've not really got time to make these decisions. They have a whole week for these things to come into effect. I actually thought it was quite interesting. I've never seen Doug Bowles kind of so animated and so angry. He's usually a very upbeat sort of guy, but I'm glad that he was treating it as a big deal, but he seemed angry. Obviously, the penalty wasn't just sending them to the rear of the field for the second successive year. The 2 and the 12 have lost their strategists. That was obviously an internal decision last year. Now it's been imposed by IndyCar. And then they've also been fined and lost the pit box selections, which are done in order of where you qualify. So they've now got the 2 least favourable pit boxes for the race. Yeah, it's another scandal with Penske appearing to flout the rules. And there's obviously this argument that it's unfair on Jacob Abel, who was bumped from the race with a legal car, that there's this suspicion that Penske have been competing all weekend long, or maybe for a couple of years with an illegal car. Obviously, this is all alleged, but Pato O'Ward made his views clear on Sunday, said that they should have been demoted to last chance qualifying. Again, the rules kind of made that so it wasn't particularly possible. With them having passed tech on Saturday, there was nothing that could really be done. That said, Bowles did kind of overwrite the rules to send them to the back of the field, but yeah, I don't know. I think the fact that it's been seen on their cars not only this week but last year, maybe even before that, is a bit dodgy. The fact there's a car sat in a museum with illegal parts is a bit of a whoa.
I think the other really concerning thing is IndyCar say it flagged up on Sunday. Well, how did that car pass tech on Saturday multiple times? And quite possibly, how did that car pass tech on every single day running last year?
Yeah.
So and it's always bad with Penske because obviously Roger Penske owns the series. So if there are any cheating scandals, like unfortunately there has been before, there's obviously a lot more eyes on them. And then for an example like this, well, people who just have an opinion on things might say, okay, well, they've got away with tech for this long and it's been kept silent, and it's only because Chip Ganassi's seen it on pit lane is why this has been raised and dealt with. How has that car suddenly been spotted in tech with an illegal part when it hasn't for ages?
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily jump into the conspiracy theories, but it's clear that there is a conflict of interest. Of course, there's going to be a conflict of interest if there's the owner of the series owns a team. And of course, there's going to be suspicions when this team has been involved in quote unquote cheating scandals 2 times in 13, 14, 15 months. It's not a great look. It's still very uncertain how they found out. Marshall Pruitt did a fantastic job in the press conference of really challenging Doug Bowles and suggesting that teams had pointed this out, and in fact had pointed out that it was on the cars all week. It was on the cars last year. That he had seen footage, which has obviously since been verified and done the rounds on social media, that it was on the cars last year as well. If indeed the car in the museum is Newgarden's winning car from last year. Doug Bowles was actually pretty furious at the notion that teams have been doing this, but nothing was shared with him. Which again is this whole case of a lot of different stories going around. He said that, he would welcome anyone who had complaints and he would share it with Kevin Blanche, better known as Rocket, who's the technical director at IndyCar. But since this has happened, he said he's just been sent a flurry of things on Penske cars and not Penske cars, which makes it kind of even more manic. But yeah, I think the biggest point that you make is, yeah, if these cars have been illegal for a while, why have they keep passing tech? Like, basically what IndyCar said is the reason that power was allowed through was because they want to get everything done quickly. They were suspicious, but they want to get everyone on track. I don't know whether that meant that they were going to inspect it again after his qualifying run or not. I don't know.
But well, they said after Newgarden's part was non-compliant that power would fail tech after his run. Which then raises another issue: is why they're letting him run with a car they know is illegal. This is weird. A safety concern.
Because Newgarden, it's still unclear whether Newgarden actually failed or not, or whether he was actually in the same position as Power. Doug Bowles wasn't particularly clear on this because they were both told that they could run, but they would probably be disqualified afterwards. I just don't understand why they were being allowed to run. I just find that really bizarre.
Especially after Penske had been chopping Power's rear wing off.
Yeah, bizarre.
In the pit lane.
Utterly bizarre. But they basically, like, this is what Doug Bowles said, is that they have to get everything through tech quickly. But like, if you have a doubt, he was saying that basically the technical director thought that they had a rule but wasn't 100% certain of it, so wanted to verify. So maybe it was a case of, right, they need to get cars on track, but then we will check it again in post and then we can pick up on it. But I think the speed of inspection feels kind of irrelevant when you're working with something that's illegal. And I think fair play to Doug Bowles, he didn't answer it totally, but he said it like he understands that the optics with Penske owning the series and Team Penske, he understands why it's a concern and understands that it's something that needs to look at and maybe something that Roger needs to address. So I liked that from him. I thought he spoke really well, actually, Doug Bowles, to be fair. But I just feel like the more we hear from it, it's one of those weedy situations where you just kind of just get even more confused.
Yeah, and I think this is arguably worse than the St. Petersburg one. One, because of the Indy 500. Two, because it turns out, okay, maybe they've been having this illegal part for years. And three, because this one seems a bit dodgier and a bit more under the table than the other one did.
I mean, with the push to pass thing, you could easily see how that would have been a mistake. Like, obviously, we still don't, I don't want to get back into that. We still don't know exactly what the truth is. It was dodgy. Obviously, Newgarden thinking it was a rule change and McLaughlin doing it accidentally, immediately switching off and what have you. That's different, because this isn't like you've accidentally had something in a different configuration and you forgot to change it back, as was their story on that occasion. This is something that's clear cut. It's across multiple cars, so it's not like it's an accident on one car. It's just not something you feel like you could do accidentally. So did they know there was a rule against it? Maybe not. Maybe that's the defense. I mean, Elio Castro Neves actually, I mean, he was the one driver who's come out and spoken. Not many drivers we've really heard from so far, but he defended Penske, which I guess is natural because he's driven for them. He was saying, yeah, they probably didn't know or whatever. It was such a negligible gain. But I don't know. You've got to be aware of the rules. Like, it's part of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a storyline that I'm sure we'll get more on throughout the rest of the week. And if there are more allegations of other cars supposedly breaking the rules, we could be in for a very, very, very messy couple of days. And the other side of the story is, well, will McLaren be escalating last year's car?
Yeah, that's where it gets really confusing, because I mean, the Indy 500 is not like a regular race. Joseph Newgarden's got his head on the trophy 2 times. And it's funny because you could probably go back in all the years and probably find something that's, or are they trying to make gains in a... Yeah, this is motorsport. This is something that came back to in the whole push to pass thing. Teams are always trying to find creative ways to make gains, and that's not excusing it by any means. But you could probably go back so many years and find little things that were probably wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible story. I think it's the fact it's Penske again, who we've had in the cheating scandal, for the team that is also owned by the person who not only owns the series but owns the speedway. So it's a story that we'll probably have to pick up again on Thursday, because there's going to be more and more to this. But at the minute, will there be more on Penske? Well, they've already got their penalties, but will anything be done about this supposed cheating on last year's car? Or what will the drivers say about the situation? Or why why did that car pass inspection previously? There's a lot to divulge still. So we'll leave it. It's a really fascinating story, and I know I said I haven't seen anything like Robert Shwartzman. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. I can't, well, at least in my lifetime, recall a cheating scandal quite like this, especially for a race this significant. So crazy.
And this is what we mean when it's been just a mad few days. It's just storylines coming from everywhere, on track, off track, top of the grid, back of the grid. The back row, and I guess this is a decent segue to last chance qualifying, but the back row of Rinus VK, Joseph Newgarden and Will Power feels like it could easily be a front row. I mean, it could. I mean, they've all been on the front row in recent years. It's pretty.
VK bonkers. Gave an absolute excellent quote. I will try and find this. He said, "If you told me a week ago I'd be starting on the same row of two Penskes, I'd have been thrilled." which is a funny story. But we'll move on to last chance qualifying, and I mean, it feels weird bringing up this late in the podcast, but oh well. It was unfortunately Jacob Abel who doesn't make the field for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. He was obviously up against his teammate Rinus VK and Marcus Armstrong, who, as you alluded to earlier, crashed on Saturday morning, and Marco Andretti. And it was a real shame for Coyne because I think Abel was, unfortunately, a lot of people's prediction to get bumped early on, but he was happy during the open test, and they went into the week, and their pace actually seemed pretty okay. Obviously, Nolan Siegel got bumped in the same car last year, and it was in the 18 car, but the same team. And there was sort of a confidence about Coyne. It felt they were looking good, running 229s, they're running competitively, and come qualifying days, their pace just completely evaporated. It actually somehow managed to get worse day on day. Even Rinus VK, who was never qualified outside the top 12 here,
seventh was his worst qualifying.
Yeah, and VK was really struggling with that car, and he was only probably about half a mile an hour quicker than Abel was. And I feel Abel had he accepted it by that point. It sort of felt in his interview that he was fearing this was going to happen, and he took it quite well. And obviously, it's always a huge shame to see somebody go, especially when it's just one. You feel so heartbroken, especially somebody who's joined us on this podcast quite a lot. It's really sad to see a good friend of the show not make the field. So it's obviously unfortunate, and I think it once again needs to serve as a wake-up call to Dale Coyne and the rest of his team that their cars have been bumped 2 years in a row, and they were 2 miles an hour off the next quickest car in last chance qualifying. It wasn't a good display at all, and I just feel a bit really sorry for both Abel and VK for that matter, because they're just driving a car which just does not have the pace at all.
I mean, it's a horrible situation. First off, having a bit like what we saw with Harvey and Rahal a couple of years ago, having two teammates having to slog it out to make the field, and essentially, what did Dale Coyne describe it as? I've got it written down somewhere. He said, "Have you ever played chess with yourself?" Because they essentially just had to treat it as two different teams, and late on in that last chance qualifying, it looked like Abel was going to basically just leave it as late as possible. So if he beat VK's time, VK couldn't respond, and then VK went on the offensive and went out and tried to improve on his time and was like 0.8 miles per hour slower, and that was made for a very nervy end. But Abel also lost a lot of pace in his second run. And yeah, losing pace has just been the theme of Dale Coyne Racing's entire week, really, because they were decently competitive. I mean, Abel was P26, which obviously isn't going to grab any headlines, but that would safely have him in the field. That's where he was on the no-toe times on Fast Friday at kind of mid 229s, that was enough to get you in the field and qualifying if you were lapping at that pace. But it was mysterious because it wasn't just a loss of pace on the 51, it was a loss of pace on both cars. And then VK's ultimate qualifying run was like over 2 miles an hour slower than Armstrong in P32. Like, it's not like they were a little bit adrift at the back. They were miles off the pace, but there was some just mysterious inherent issue in the car. I mean, Abel thought they'd found something overnight. I think they'd changed the gearbox Saturday into Sunday. They thought they'd found something, and then clearly whatever they thought just hadn't worked. And I know VK, I saw an interview with him, and he was actually saying, like, it's probably been the best handling car I've had, better than some of the cars that's got him to the top four in the front row. but it just didn't have the speed. On a straight line, it was not even getting over 235 as other cars were getting to pretty much 240. And yeah, qualifying runs in the 226, 227 range as anyone else as kind of a minimum was doing 229s was pretty brutal. And I don't think either of their drivers did anything wrong. I actually think they drove pretty well. And the cars were handling well. There was just something that was, making them just basically screw it, like meant they had no outright pace, is what Abel kept saying. And obviously we had a bit of drama at the end, but I don't know. It wasn't really a pleasant last chance qualifying, was it?
Really strange one. It was a really, really strange one. It's been a really difficult start to the year for Jacob Abel, and you obviously hope his fortunes pick up after this. But he did nothing wrong. It wasn't like Nolan Siegel last year where he binned it in his hope for glory. The car looked to handle pretty well. It was
fine.
Just incredibly slow, and I think it was just so strange that the car progressively got slower on speed. It just doesn't really make any sense. It's like, are there adjustments going backwards, or is this car incredibly sensitive to conditions? Or because it was really strange because they were going slower on their second runs in last chance qualifying when, admittedly the engines are hotter, but the track temperature's cooled even further.
In that morning session ahead of last chance qualifying, VK did a run that was like he was struggling to get into the 225s, and he just said the car was weird. Big inquest needed there over the next 12 months because that's rookies for that team in successive years that have been bumped, and this is obviously a team that's been known to nurture rookies so well and give them such good opportunities. Obviously Jacob, he's a good kid, and I don't think he deserves this. It does sting a bit. I know he did seem like he come to terms with it, but he also kind of said in the press conference it's been a tricky start to the season and self-doubts are starting to creep in, which you don't like to hear. But I don't think he can really fault anything he's done this week. I think he performed well. It's just no speed.
Yeah, I think similar story to Nolan Siegel last year, and obviously he's bounced back pretty well. I know obviously it's very different circumstances, but I think someone like Pato O'Ward failed to qualify for their first Indy 500 in a tiny little team in Carlin, and there's obviously still a great success. So it's not over for Jacob Abel at all.
I'd just like to say, Pato gave some brilliant quotes saying he'd rather not be in the field than be in a car that's just ridiculously slow and feels almost dangerously slow in the race. That's what he said, but he was actually relieved when he got bumped in 2019. But you mentioned kind of bounce back stories. Should we get on to a couple of the bounce back stories?
I'd like to start with Colton Herta, I think, is the best place. He was once again favourite for the Fast 12, and just on his first lap, just completely blew it at turn one. Car went very late into the corner. He had a really big impact, ended up in turn two, which is a crash I've seen quite a few times recently. Someone starts their crash in turn one and finishes in turn two. He was on the side of the wall for a long period of time. And the aero screen did an absolutely excellent job because it was a really scary impact for Herta. And it was very, 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 very similar to the one he had a carb day. I think it must have been 22.
It was.
He had an accident, so very, very similar to that. And you think, okay, well, it's qualifying over. He's here tomorrow, and then Andretti do an absolutely sensational job of their backup car and gets Herta out there before the end of the day, and somehow qualifies for the field in his backup car, which has obviously not really been too trimmed, or has his first laps in that car and qualifies for the field, and really strangely quicker than his teammate Marco Andretti still.
Yeah, we saw quite a few crashes very similar. It was kind of the car basically spins. It's quite, impossible to save. I think it was kind of emblematic of, as I mentioned earlier, the tricky conditions, a bit of a balance change. It's just making it, the weight's making it really hard to save the cars, but they kind of are seeming to spin and then kind of catch the safety barrier initially with the left front and then kind of hook into the left rear. And that seems to be what's sending cars airborne. We saw it with Simpson, we saw it with McLaughlin as well. But this was a terrifying crash. And obviously with qualifying, you're on board or you're watching every bit of every run. So it happened in real time. And it's one of those that really makes your heart kind of burst out of your chest, skip a beat. But it didn't really look like Herta did much wrong. He just stood absolutely no chance. And as I say, with the hybrid, it looks really impossible to save those moments. I don't know whether the hybrid's playing into seeing cars lift off a bit more, because it certainly feels like we're seeing that. Yeah, and then he goes out with, I think, little over an hour to go, pretty much 60 minutes to go. He's back out on track. You think, right, maybe they'll just do an install and make sure everything's okay and resign themselves to coming back for last chance qualifying. But no, Herta goes out, drives flat, first, just straight out the box, drives flat, pins it. And I mean, I don't think, like, drivers are kind of varied in whether they kind of think about these things or they get rocked by these things. Herta's one, and he was basically just like, doesn't scare me, don't care about hitting the wall, this place just really doesn't scare me. And you could see that in his run. I mean, he just went flat, balls to the wall, and I mean, it's just incredible resilience, I think, all around. I think it's heroic from I mean, Herta was saying it was heroic from the team. He was really pretty down on himself because he knew that was a car that could have easily made the Fast 12 probably. But that was, as much as he won't admit, that was heroic from him as well. I mean, the weight jacket was broken too, which added another factor to that. It was, the car was totaled, and the only thing that survived was the engine. But yeah, I mean, he is definitely a hero. I think the fearlessness of that was pretty amazing. Again, one of the stories that's kind of just been forgotten, but on Saturday night, that was one heck of a story. That was, I mean, brilliant recovery, brilliant. And should we do Marcus Armstrong as well?
Yeah, so Armstrong, obviously, pretty similar story. Crashed on Saturday morning. As I said about McLaughlin, it's why a lot of teams won't go out to practice, because if you crash, you've dug yourself a very deep hole. And Armstrong again was probably I would have said would almost certainly been the Fast 12. So that was obviously really frustrating for him. And then he went off in a stretcher, which was a bit more concerning because he just walked away basically. Armstrong was seen and released, and he was eventually cleared after they checked him for concussion. Armstrong had been feeling a bit unwell actually the day before as well, which was a bit of a concern too.
He sounded pretty rough. He had a pretty bad cold, I think.
Yeah, and he went out late on the day, later than Herta, in a Frankenstein car, because there's half of Rosenqvist's livery, half of his.
Well, that's what I thought as well, but I think it was actually his car. It was his Root Insurance orange and black car.
Oh yeah, true, maybe. Oh, because it was his road course, was it? It must have been his road course car.
That was a road course. Yeah, that was a road course car.
So quite possibly. So I said Armstrong Indy 500 2025 versus Ericsson Gateway 23. We're around a half below, half Ericsson livery. Anyway, the Frankenstein livery wasn't able to make the field the first day. That wasn't really a surprise. Came back from bump day. Wasn't super quick, but it was obviously a lot quicker than both the coin cars. So it was all right in the end. So another good rebuild job there from MyShack Racing. I think Armstrong will obviously be a bit disappointed because he definitely could have qualified better. But he made the field, which at the end of the day is the most important thing.
I mean, I think he could have been in the Fast 6, really. Him and Rosenqvist were pretty on par. Good kind of quality control, I think, from MyShack Racing. They were both pretty similar throughout the week. But, I mean, this obviously wasn't as dramatic as Herta's crash, but it was very much like Sato's crash, which actually, I think the nature of it almost made it a bigger impact for the driver. And I think for Armstrong as well, the difference between him and Herta is Herta's had big crashes. This was the biggest crash of Armstrong's career by quite a distance. I mean, he goes into turn 1 on lap 1 of this qualifying sim. Feels like they're fairly conservative, but again, it was that whole thing about conditions, and it was again the same thing of kind of swaps ends and hits with one end of the car, hooks the other end in. Thankfully, this time didn't lift airborne, but again, kind of slid all the way to almost to turn 2 really before he came to rest, and he took a while to get out of the car. A bit like we saw with Sato actually at the test. I think he immediately radioed that he was okay, but ended up on a stretcher, and it's never good when you see that. He looked a little bit kind of rocked by it, but he waved, put his thumbs up, which was encouraging. But I mean, his first run out of the box, I mean, he was some way off. I think he was working at kind of 225, 226, which was absolutely nowhere. They had issues with the telemetry, the weight jacket was broken, so they basically, for their second run then, they didn't have any data to show what was going wrong on the first run, but he managed to find 3 miles per hour, and which again, it wasn't enough to make the field. I think they aborted his run actually after 2 laps, but it was enough to kind of build his confidence. And then come last chance qualifying, obviously nowhere near the speed that his initial car had, but he was very easily in the field. So again, another really good recovery that just got a bit overshadowed by what Herta did.
Yeah, and then Kevin Simpson was the other major crash in qualifying trim because he crashed on Friday. So obviously the good news for him was the team had a bit more time to set up that car for qualifying. I believe he did go to a backup tub to Simpson, so that was obviously a big repair job. But he actually had a really good draw again. I think he went out, but he must have been out third. I think
he was third. Yeah,
I think he was third. Anyway, I think he's been third 2 years in a row. Really good draw. Basically round one, so that was good enough. Don't do anything silly. And I think he's going to line up. He qualified. Let me confirm this. Simpson qualified 15th, so a lineup 13th on Sunday.
But that was a massive crash as well. It's probably the smallest of the. I mean, Kyle Larson, actually, it must be mentioned, also crashed on Fast Friday, but his was kind of more of a front wing, took most of the impact and maybe slightly hit the rear. But again, that was we'll come on to Larson in a bit. But Simpson's crash was probably the smallest of the big ones that we saw. But still, like, he came to rest in the pit lane. I think it was very lucky that he didn't have like a Marcus Ericsson from last year where he collected the attenuator. It was a very similar crash in many ways to the one that Ericsson had on Thursday last year that put him into a backup car. But I think for Simpson, I mean, he was the youngest of the drivers that crashed. This guy, he's only 20 years old, again, the biggest crash of his career. To go back out on qualifying, I mean, even qualifying morning, he went out in that practice session and was working in kind of the late 230s. So to put himself not just safely in the field, but just on the edge of kind of, I mean, he was in the Fast 12 for quite a lot of the day. I thought it was a good bit of rebound. Obviously, he's racing for Chip Ganassi Racing. They probably have the best of the best in terms of backup cars. I know Penske had a spare Speedway car for McLaughlin, but another one where Simpson was lifted up into the air. And I think when you saw the crash, you didn't expect that. So it was quite alarming when we first saw the replay that, he was lifted up into the air and then it was quite a heavy landing, but didn't end up upside down, thankfully, because again, that could have been a bit worse. But I know we kind of brushed over it. I'd like to talk a bit about the McLaughlin crash actually as well. Because that was terrible. Like, it was pretty terrifying because at the time I think they were showing the commentary booth actually, because Ryan Hunter-Reay was up there. And then it immediately cuts to basically McLaughlin it's after his car has been upside down and he's basically just righting himself, but it's this shot of his helmet. And McLaughlin's doing this very strange thing where he's like holding his helmet rather than like most drivers do. They just cross themselves when they crash. It was a very bizarre sight. So yeah, that was a very quite alarming thing to kind of just cut to. But I mean, it really kind of, I don't know, it kind of just made McLaughlin's comments the day before about like qualifying and running qualifying trim doesn't get any goddamn easier, and that he just hates running, and that he was so relieved to have easily made the Fast 12 after one run on Saturday. He actually ended up in the commentary booth. But I mean, this I would be inclined to say this was probably the biggest crash of all of them. It was a seismic shunt. I mean, again, rather than turn one, this one was turn two. Similar though, hooks round, hits the front left, hits the rear left. But then the way this car took it, probably got more airtime than Hertz, but it kind of came crashing down on its left side and basically bounced. The car basically bounced, and it hit with such force that, as you said earlier, Dan, ripped the tyre off. There's going to need to be investigations there because, I mean, that was supposed to be fixed after Kirkwood losing his wheel. So, but then at the same time, like you've got to think, there's only so much you can probably do in terms of materials you can use for these things, because at an impact like that, you're running at 230 miles per hour. I mean, as the car bounced back to its right side, it put a dent in the track, which was kind of bonkers, really.
Right, I think we need to give our props to the other two in the front row, because we've been going for almost an hour now. We haven't even mentioned Takuma Sato yet, who qualified second for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. I mean, overall, they'll be so delighted. One, to have no cars in last chance qualifying, because it looked like on Friday afternoon that we were going to have the same story of Graham Rahal.
Even on Saturday, because I mean, we kind of only brushed over Marco Andretti, but it was quite a dramatic end to Saturday qualifying, where Marco Andretti, he missed out on bumping Graham Rahal into the bottom three by 0.004 miles per hour. Over 10 miles. That is insane. And then
missed out on doing his final run by about another 2 seconds.
Because basically, they I don't think they'd got him fueled fast enough to put it in the priority lane to, I was going to say to pull his time, but he didn't have a time because he was in the bottom four. But Connor Daly was waiting in the non-priority lane, and because Marco wasn't there, he was allowed out. And the clock just, I mean, that was dramatic in itself. Connor Daly missed out by like the finest of margins because he didn't put his weight tracker back or something. But yeah, Rahal was safe by 0.004 miles per hour. But it's that same story again, isn't it? That RLL have some drivers fighting. I mean, Foster and Di Francesco did a decent job to not be under any pressure, which was quite impressive. But you still have Rahal fighting at the rear and Takuma Sato on the front row.
Yeah, I mean, Rahal we speak about every year, and I don't understand how he hasn't got better, especially in comparison to his teammates who are all vastly inferior and experienced to him. Like, they go through changes every year. He must have changed his car several times. At least you hope he's done. And he's still inherently slow. Like, how? He says they change everything. They change every bolt, they change every wing, and it's still slow. Like, how?
I mean, they did a really good job actually to find some speed to actually get into the field, because his first qualifying run was that classic dreaded Graham Rahal run you're watching on board, and he's just lifting in every corner, and I think he was at 228 maybe. And I've written down a couple of things he said. He said that basically his car's numb to any changes that are made, even if they're working on the other cars, and that his car is quick, but we can't use it, is what he said as well. He made it in the end though. But Takuma Sato's the story here. It's great relief for Graham. I've got to say, it's great because 2 years in last chance qualifying, he must have been unbelievably relieved. I don't think he was happy to be 30th after the positive test, but Sato is the story.
Yes, with his rocket ship engine.
As Graham said last year.
As Graham said, but like, come on, it's a Japanese driver with a Japanese engine manufacturer. They're not going to give him a slow engine, are they?
I mean, what makes this so impressive is not only is it impressive that Takuma Sato is coming in a one-off effort and doing this at 48 years old, he absolutely totaled his car in the test. This is a brand new car. And I know we've spoken about all the impressive turnarounds that, you know, Andretti doing hers in 4 hours and what have you. But that's to get him into, you know, P29 or P27 is he starting now, maybe because of the Penske stuff. But like, that's obviously not the perfect job. RLL teams take like an entire year to refine and fine tune their speedway cars. RLL have done so in 3 weeks and given Takuma Sato a brand new car prepared in 3 weeks that can make up the front row. Wow.
I've got to say, out of everybody, the best thing every year seems to come is Takuma Sato's qualifying run, because every time you're watching like this, like trying to not to see him absolutely throw it in the wall. Every single time he goes recording, like, right, he's done here. And somehow every single corner he's out on the other side. And if you're not watching a Takuma Sato qualifying run, quite literally behind your sofa, I don't think you're doing it right.
I don't know how many drivers have mottos, but I can't imagine any sportsman has a better motto than Takuma Sato's "No attack, no chance." That's brilliant.
Yeah, honestly, he's absolutely terrifying to watch because you feel like he's going to throw it in the wall every single quarter. And if someone comes out like the other side, it always means he's absolutely rapid. What I find interesting, I think this is only the third time he started in the Fast Six. The other two is when he won the Indianapolis 500 in 2017 and 2020.
I do not write him off because I think he's he's one. I'd arguably put him in my top 5 favourites to win, I think.
There's so many good stories for drivers to win, and I think Sato would be such an amazing story to win again.
To become a 3-time winner and to do it at 48 years old would be.
I mean, maybe go over the end of this episode, but I could think of like 10 drivers right now who'd be the most.
Well, maybe this is one for This is one for our preview at the end of the week. Tune in to find out.
Because I mean, well, Helio would definitely be one. Just quickly touch over Sato, O'Ward after last year. Imagine if a Penske wins now, that'd be a story.
I mean, imagine that. Like Newgarden, it would have been a cool enough story anyway. Like making it from P32 to become the first 3-time winner would be astonishing. And actually, I forgot to cue this in earlier. We spoke to, Fast Friday, they have media availabilities with RLL, Penske and Chip Ganassi Racing. I'll cue in here while we're talking about them, Team Penske, because I asked Joseph Newgarden and then kind of followed up with Rick Mears, which, by the way, was an absolute honour to speak to Rick Mears about basically what it takes to be perfect at Indy. Because Newgarden had kind of said a few times that, you've basically got to be perfect. But then he kind of backtracked a bit to say, actually, I'm not sure you ever can be perfect. But he gave a good answer. Hi, Dave. First of all, for Joseph, you've obviously used the word perfect quite a lot in kind of what it takes to win here. But can you kind of just define what perfect actually means at Indy and what it takes to get there? You know, whether that's something in the team, your approach. What did it take to finally be perfect after all of those years to get over the line? And not once, but twice as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe perfect's the wrong word. I don't know that you can have a perfect day, any day, but you have to be as close to it as possible. I guess the way I would sum it up is, Indy magnifies the team effort more than anywhere. I've stated that a lot, and I think it's very true, abundantly true here at this speedway. Everybody has to, pull forward and really perform in an excellent way. I don't know how you win this race without the complete team. It's the same thing sitting on the pole. It just magnifies the team effort through and through. So on race day, you can have all the ingredients. You can feel like you have the winning car underneath you. You can feel, really good about the moves you're making. But if everything is not complete from a team side, you will not win the race. It just has to be almost as close to perfect as possible. So I think that's what I've tried to, just continue to repeat, is that it's such a team effort here. It is everywhere, but it's magnified at Indy to another level that we don't see for the rest of the year.
And then for Rick as well, you obviously did this 4 times, so you had to be quote unquote kind of perfect 4 times to win this race. Looking back, how did you manage to achieve that feat, and how much does it mean to you to be remembered in that exclusive club?
Having the right team and the right equipment and the tools you need to get the job done is what it takes, and everything being in place at the right time, no mistakes. You're only, as the old saying, as strong as your weakest link, and try to control all the variables and then have a lot of lady luck with you also. There's always a little lady luck involved, and you control your own destiny to a point, but there's a little lady luck there too. So it's just all got to come together on the day. And it's like I've always said, you never know about this place until you see the checkered flag. And we were talking about that the other day. And somebody asked me after my first win, when did you realize you had it sewed up? And I said, once I came off of turn 4 heading for the checkered flag, not until I got by pit in. Because once I got by pit in, then I knew if all the wheels fell off, I could slide the rest of the way. But that's as soon as I let myself feel I had it won.
And then for Scott, we've obviously seen Simon Pagenaud with you again. What areas has he kind of helped you the most, and what more has he helped you with this year as well? And is this solely an Indy thing, or is he helping you kind of in the wider season as well?
We're talking the whole season, but I think Simon's been just really helpful in a lot of ways, just how I look at things outside the box. I probably, a detriment to my own career throughout the years, is probably I haven't been as intricate with like looking at little details, and I think Simon's the professor in that regard. Like he's very, very strives for perfection in a lot of ways, and how he sets up his car and what he feels. So it's probably looking at allowing me to look into more details and just the way I look at myself and the driving and the lines and what I'm doing with weight jacker and bars. So it's really helped sort of accelerate my progress.
Anyway, we got a bit sidetracked there. But as I said, O'Ward would be a great story to win after what happened last year. And he qualified 3rd. So first ever time he's on the front row, which is quite a good result because it felt like McLaren were lacking a little bit of pace all week. And O'Ward really didn't seem like a favourite for pole. I mean, I wasn't really expecting him to be in the fastest. I know I predicted him, but yeah, it was really good from O'Ward. I thought after the fast 12 he would be on pole. I was quite wrong in the end, but he'll be really happy because a lot of his 500s, it feels like he's had to either work his way through the pack or come from like a difficult scenario. And well, the car who started 3rd last year won, so maybe that bodes well for him.
He did not have a good car last year. This might actually be the best car that O'Ward has had. I mean, he said that, I think this was on Thursday, maybe he said this. He feels like he's actually never had a car that's like, he feels like he's always had the worst car on the team, which I think is kind of justifiable. And he's just wheeled it to some just absolutely ungodly performances given kind of the actual ceiling of the actual, well, on paper potential of what the car he had underneath him. So this was kind of the first time he's really shone like this in qualifying, I think he felt. And yeah, very, very impressive. He was basically saying it feels like the fastest he's ever gone here, and puts himself in a really, really good position, I've got to say. Not much more to add, but yeah, impressive.
Good. Who would be your top 3 500 winners just because of the story? Mine would be, as I've given much time, Helio would definitely be number 1 for me. I would definitely put Connor Daly number 2, and number 3 is a bit more wide open, but based on what we've seen, I'd go for someone like Shwartzman.
Top 3?
Yeah.
Oh
no! I've changed number 3, Carl Larson.
Okay, if we can do 5, I would say Shwartzman, because I can't really pick 3. I would say Shwartzman, Daly, Castro and Neves, Larson, and Newgarden. Especially in where he's starting now.
He was hated after St. Petersburg. If he wins this race, my word. It's going to go bad for the guy. Well, I don't feel bad for him.
He's going to have to just I mean, I think he's done a better job recently of embracing kind of the villain.
But his run yesterday was absolutely hilarious.
Well, this is the thing as well. We were having this conversation. He's villainized, but he's actually like, as a guy, as a person, Newgarden is about as genuine, I think, as you can kind of come across. And so when he's he's denied his qualifying run, he's basically just running around the track. He dabs like it's 2015, and then runs up to the radio commentary booth and starts calling a lap that's not even happening, that they're just showing a replay of. I thought that was really cool. I really enjoyed
that. I think we probably need to touch on the hybrid very briefly as well, because we spoke about quite a lot how it's going to change the weight, and it did make things slower. But what the real interesting point was when you deploy in your qualifying lap, we did actually see quite a mix of strategies. Some went for a slow trickle, some went for deploying their first lap, some went for a deploy on sort of their third lap. So it's actually a really interesting mix of strategies there, which I've added an extra element to the qualifying runs.
I actually think it made an impact on the qualifying runs as well. Like, obviously, when you compare to last year, it's killed a bit of the speed. But actually, I think it made it more of a challenge, because in recent years, we've seen teams don't really have to take risks anymore, because they can just trim a ton and they're kind of comfortable, whatever. Especially like last year with the car was pretty light comparative, given obviously we'd kind of cut a bit of weight in anticipation for the hybrid, but the hybrid wasn't there. I think this has probably been the best weekend for the hybrid. Kind of going along with something I heard David Land say on one of his YouTube videos. But I think, it gave teams an extra dimension to master, which I don't think is ever a bad thing at Indy. Just that pursuit for perfection, it makes it even more challenging. I think Indy is all about the challenge. I think the added weight has added more of a driving challenge. I would be interested to see whether the whole more airborne crashes is impacted by the hybrid, in which case I think that is a concern. But I think the added driving challenge and the cars being on that knife edge, is that not how Indy should be? I think it is. And I think it's kind of added a lot more unpredictability, because it is so hard to master both the skill of the hybrid and the perfect kind of deployment strategy, and also that balance. I think actually added a lot of this excitement, because it adds that added layer of jeopardy with, it definitely felt like it made the cars more sensitive to the conditions. I know over qualifying weekend it was really, really windy, and the wind was changing directions day to day. But I think teams are now once again having to actually flirt with crossing the line with how much they trim on qualifying runs, rather than all kind of being at the same level. But yeah, I think it's kind of, I don't know. This feels like the most positive the hybrid has been. Like, I feel like it's just been a complete negative, and it might be a negative again next week when it comes to a processional race, which I really hope doesn't happen. But at least for this Indy 500 qualifying weekend, I think we've seen the potential of the hybrid, and I think it really just has shown and magnified kind of the extent to which the drivers are proper superheroes, really, because they were driving in some pretty tricky conditions. I mean, Fast Friday was hilarious. Nobody could put together more than 2 or 3 laps, let alone a full qualifying sim. But I just think it added to the test, and I liked that.
Cool, and as we usually do, we'll go over the running order, although it's not the running order. We get qualifying order, starting lineup order, something.
Qualifying results, I don't know.
Qualifying results. Front row was Shwartzman, Sato, and O'Ward, followed by a very aligned second row. Scott Dixon, Felix Rosenqvist, and Alex Palou. Was actually a bit disappointed at those three's pace, especially on the second day. In particular, Palou, because Palou, I think, was probably the favourite from pole, maybe outside McLaughlin or alongside McLaughlin, was fastest on Saturday. And he was in the 2:33s. And come Sunday, he was in the mid 2:31. So he lost quite a lot of speed there, which I think was quite surprising, actually, because Palou looked really good all week long. And come qualifying day, or qualifying day 2, didn't really seem to have the pace we thought he would.
It was very volatile. I feel like day to day, there were a lot of kind of changes. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it is conditions and adapting to the various different conditions. But Palou was gone from kind of lapping in the 2:33s to the 2:31s.
But even Rosenqvist, between the fast 12 and the fast 6, lost a mile an hour.
Yeah, it's bizarre. But if you'd given me the front row and the second row, I would definitely said the second row was going to be your front row. If you'd given me both of them and beforehand, like I thought Palou was going to be on pole throughout the week. To be honest, I think he's starting sixth. He has a phenomenal race car. I'd still put him as,
and he extends his championship lead, by the way.
I'd put him arguably as the favourite still, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, especially looking how far back Newgarden's starting.
I think O'Ward you've got to put in the mix. And Dixon's got a good race car.
Yeah, I think those three, and again, Sato as well. I even think Rosenqvist, to be fair, he's looked really strong all week. But why don't we hear from Alex Palou? I spoke to him also on Fast Friday about, well, mainly, is his career a success without the Indy 500? And also hear from Scott Dixon here as well on some of the tricky conditions. Cheers, Dave. First of all, a couple for Alex. I'm kind of interested in how you absorb the success that you're having at the moment, in the moment. You know, every celebration kind of seems as big as the last when you get out of the car. How much are you making sure you kind of actually enjoy it while it's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. We take every win as if it's the first one and the last one. We don't know when the next one is going to be. You always want and work towards trying to be able to celebrate almost every race weekend. But the truth is that it's tough to win. Like, you need every single piece to be perfect. So whenever we get that chance, we celebrate, and at least during that moment, we take it and enjoy it as much as possible. And then switch to the next one. But yeah, we enjoy every single win as if it's the first one and the last one.
And then obviously there's this perception that kind of a driver's career is almost incomplete if they don't win the 500. Does that kind of resonate with you? I know despite your multiple championships, how important is it to you that you do win the Indy 500?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think as an IndyCar driver, if you've not won the Indy 500, you're not going to be 100% complete. So yeah, that's what we're working towards. I think we've been learning, we've been getting closer and closer, and I feel more comfortable every time that we're on track. And hopefully we can change it soon. But yeah, I mean, if my career ends in like 20 years and I've not won an Indy 500, it'll be for sure not a successful career.
And then just one for Scott as well. You mentioned yesterday after practice about the wind over qualifying weekend. How does wind impact things when you are going kind of at those speeds? And I guess, how do you adapt to that, both kind of in terms of setup and as a driver as well?
Yeah, I think wind, obviously, I think it looks like it's going to be a little bit cooler, which is kind of a nice situation. I think today's going to be pretty tough. It's got a little bit of wind, and then it's going to be pretty hot. It's easier just to miss things, I guess. If you're getting gusts, gears are a little bit harder to get right. It may change some of the hybrid strategy with if you're getting a lot of limiter, you may regen more and deploy more throughout the run, opposed to kind of other strategies that you had set in mind. So I think it's just more variables. I think it would definitely be difficult. I think the degradation over the 4 laps is definitely up with the weight. So yeah, I guess it's like I said yesterday, I think it will just create opportunity for more mistakes. So you kind of have to be really dialed in.
So row 3 was headed up by David Malukas, which was pretty good qualifying attempt actually from David Malukas. He must be pretty pleased with that, ahead of Christian Lundgaard and Marcus Ericsson. So a row where I feel like we'll be quite happy, because Lundgaard has never qualified well. He's got the RLL excuse though, so maybe give that to him.
He found a heck of a lot of speed,
Yeah.
by the way, because he was not quick on Fast Friday. I mean, actually, his first qualifying lap on Saturday was in the 2:28,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's a great rebound.
Ericsson again, top Andretti, which was pretty good actually, because he seemed to be a bit behind everybody else in that program and ended up making the fast 12, which is pretty good.
They will be disappointed as a team, though, having obviously Hurst's crash, Marco down in the bottom 5, and Kirkwood felt like he was fine tuning away from being in the pole fight, and he ended up 25th. Well, he will start 23rd, but that was pretty bad.
And Lucas, I think we spoke quite a lot about AJ Foyt's poor start to the year, but that will give him a little bit of confidence. I know he's not the Foyt we expected to be in the fast 12, but good on him.
Good stuff.
Well, I said the end of the fast 12, but it really wasn't. McLaughlin will line up inside row 4 ahead of Connor Daly and Alexander Rossi. As you said, Connor Daly missed out on the fast 12 by the finest of margins.
I think that is a strong row in terms of possible bets for the win. And I'm being genuine with Connor Daly as well. I think he has had, I mean, his car it was really fast on Thursday in particular. It was very fast in qualifying. If it wasn't for his mistake, would have been in the fast 12 anyway. I think he's a genuine contender. Juncos Hollinger Racing they've brought some very, very, very good cars. I think he's a genuine, his race car looks really good.
Row 4 will be Kevin Simpson, Ed Carpenter, and Santino Ferrucci. Ferrucci, a bit of a difficult week. He had to change his car quite early on. And he had a lot of confidence by the end of the week, but it didn't really seem to have the pace I think we quite expected him to, which was surprising, is what I'd say about that one. The row preceding them is Devin D, Francesco, Stingray Robb, and Christian Rasmussen. Then we have Carl Larson, Louis Foster, and Callum Minot, so British row alongside Carl Larson. A bit disappointed with Larson. He's had 2 crashes now at IMS after having none last year, and it's not the same pace that we saw him have last year.
I think part of that is actually Aaron McLaren have not looked particularly quick. And I also think it's kind of emblematic as well of the fact that the car has just got more difficult to drive. I think he's probably a bit of a victim of that. As you said, he said that it's sketchy qualifying at Indy and he doesn't particularly enjoy it. Yeah, he made the field. I don't think I was ever in doubt, but obviously after his incident in the test and then an incident on Fast Friday as well, it wasn't super ideal, but he's in the show and he's starting mid-pack this time. Also, just on the road before as well, worth mentioning, Christian Rasmussen's had a couple of incidents. He got away with a couple of spins, actually. He spun on, was it maybe Thursday? Had very, very light contact with the wall, but was generally okay. Car-wise, he was fine, obviously. And then again, as we record on Monday, he's kind of just slapped the wall out of turn 2 with his right rear and broke the toe link, went into a bit of a spin, light contact with the inside wall as well. So he's been ruffling a few feathers. Nolan Siegel produced a very sweary radio, actually, saying something along the lines of Rasmussen is a beep idiot, which I don't think we've ever heard from Siegel. He's usually very calm and quiet. So that was something. Rasmussen is not changed. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it's exactly the same last year, wasn't he? Then we have Elio Castroneves, Carl Kirkwood, and Nolan Siegel. As you said, really disappointed from Kirkwood because he was a lot of people's prediction to be the fast 6, and he was just absolutely nowhere. Really, really strange. Siegel qualifies for his first Indianapolis 500. Castroneves was really upset after his first run. He was really angry.
He still had a smile on his face.
Yeah. Ended up, though, qualifying the field quite comfortably, so that was all right in the end. Then it was Ryan Hunter, Ray, Jack Harvey, and Colton Herter. I was spoken about Herter. Dry and Reinbold haven't really had the pace which Ryan Hunter Ray reached the fast 12 last year. Then row 10 will be Graham Rahal, Marco Andretti, Marcus Armstrong, and as we know, the final row will be Rinus VK, Joseph Newgarden, and Will Power.
And breathe.
And breathe, yes. We'll obviously do a bit more of this later on in the week. That's just to give you a little bit of a insight. We'll probably maybe not go driver by driver, but we'll cover probably quite a lot of them more in depth.
We're going to have media day as well, and we'll hear what the drivers are all feeling and thinking as well, which would be pretty useful, I think, for everyone. So there's realistically, it'll probably come to you on carb day, I would imagine, before the final practice.
And some other cool news, the Indy 500 are sold out this year for the first time since 2016, which is really good to see. They've also lifted the local blackout in Indiana because of it being filled up, basically. They haven't said that it's going to guarantee that a sellout's going to remove the blackout and vice versa, but the blackout's finally been lifted, which has been like a bit of a sticking point for a while, and I must have been sold out. And I think the statistic which goes around, such a cool statistic, it's 1 in every 1,100 people in America will be at Indianapolis Motor Speedway on May the 25th.
It's incomprehensible. 232,000 grandstand seats have sold out. There's going to be over 350,000 people. It's just every year, it blows your mind the amount of people that is. It's because I mean they get decent attendances every day qualifying weekend, but all of a sudden just for race weekend it just absolutely comes alive. It's amazing. One day we'll be there, Dan.
One day. We predicted the field top to bottom, bottom to top last week, but it only counts for the fastest predicted tournament. I went for Power, Newgarden, McLaughlin. LOL. And O'Ward, Palou, and Sato. So I actually got 3 at the end, which is all right.
I went for Palou, so that's 1. McLaughlin, still 1. Newgarden, still 1. Power, still 1. Rossi, still 1. And Dixon, so 2.
Okay, so yes, we were. Oh, we might be drawing now. No, maybe you were 2 ahead. Anyway, I've closed the gap. I got 3 and you got 2. So we're closing the gap. I think we worked out from my original prediction, I have 3 correct. So didn't go too well.
I was getting a headache trying to work it out because the grid's now all jumbled up from the one that we got through yesterday. So I think I got none on my original one. Then we did it again on Fast Friday, which I actually got 3 on my Fast 6 from that. Doesn't count for anything, but pre-season friendly of a Fast 6 predictor. I think I got 1. I got Dixon right on my Fast Friday one.
Counts for something.
If it counts for anything.
Counts for something, eh?
This doesn't wipe out the Shwartzman prediction. Where did you predict him after Fast Friday, by the way?
That's a very good question. After Fast Friday, let's have a look. I predicted Shwartzman 22nd.
Okay, I went for 27th, which is still pretty bad.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad, so we'll take that. But I think for this week, it's mostly it, apart from one thing, which you didn't know I'm bringing up, but I do need to bring up.
Okay.
Viewers, I apologise about the sign. It's the wrong way around on my screen. It was, and now she told me it's the wrong way around on his screen. But anyway, I can't point. There we are. That's the information you need to know about what's happening this week.
So does that mean the Knicks are going to beat the Pacers?
The Knicks are absolutely beating the Pacers. Absolutely. No,
well, you're not going to be friends with any of the IndyCar paddock bar Scott McLaughlin.
No. So. Did you speak about us last week? Yeah, we did speak about us last week. I think by the time last week, the Pacers already wrapped up themselves being the Eastern Conference Finals, and the Knicks had to beat the Celtics. We lost in Game 5, but we had a very dominant victory in Game 6. So I always enjoy this because the big thing in Indianapolis, there's been a few questions about it in the press conference, that 25th is Game 3, which is the first game in Indiana. And the Knicks were really fancied to get through, so I'm delighted already. And I am now against the entire IndyCar paddock for the rest of the week, is in supporting the mighty New York Knicks. So I'll do it again. Knicks in 6, live on the podcast. It's going to happen by this time next week. Well, Game 3 would have happened, so we'll get a good picture into what's going on. But anyway, I think we're rambling on a little bit, so we better close on what has been a truly remarkable week at Indianapolis. I mean, as we said, lots of heroes, lots of zeros, and several stories that will continue throughout the week. And as we said, we're going to be back later on in the week to give a bit more of a preview, because there's been so much to cover this week that it wouldn't really do it justice trying to cram everything into an episode, because I think we could quite possibly be here for hours. So we're back again later this week just to preview the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500.
I think I'm going to hibernate before then.
Yeah, good idea. There's no more practice until we do this episode. So
after it's manic. After 7 successive days of cars on track, I don't know what I'm going to do for the next 3 days. Well, I do. I'm going to, as I said, hibernate until carb day. But yeah, no, actually, being serious, keep an eye out on the DIVEBOMB site. We're going to have some cool stuff on there. So keep an eye out on that. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. And yeah, stay tuned end of the week.
And yeah, That's it for this week. Well, not for this week, this episode. We'll see you this week. And we'll obviously be back next Tuesday to recap what's hopefully going to be an awesome Indianapolis 500. Weather looking good? I haven't seen it yet.
It looks all right.
It looks all right. So it would be a bit problematic if we had a Monday 500. That would be so bad. Anyway, let's not think about that. Let's think about on the good side of stuff, which is we are only 6 days away from the great spectacle of racing. But for this episode, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.